Welcome and thank you all for joining us. My name is Miriam Hewitt. I'm Assistant Director at the Center for Public Service. And today's event is part of the CPS Speaker Series and will focus on how to support the Pointe-au-Chien Indian Tribe who suffered devastation from Hurricane Ida and is experiencing hardship. So it's my pleasure to introduce our panelists. Dr. Julie Albert, Associate Professor in Chemical and Biomolecular Engineering, Dr. Jelagat Cheruiyot, Professor of Practice in the Department of Ecology and Evolutionary Biology, also Duren Professor at Newcomb-Tulane College, and Dr. Laura Kelley, who teaches in the Department of History. I want to add that each of them also has in-depth experience with the field of community engagement, whether through teaching service learning courses or conducting community engaged research projects or both. So they're scholars, but also advocates for the communities that they collaborate with. I'm grateful for their time today to share aspects of post-Ida recovery efforts amongst the Pointe-au-Chien Indian Tribe. So I'll start with a couple of questions to our panelists. If you have any questions, feel free to raise your hand at any point or put them in the chat. All right, so to our panelists, let me start by asking each of you if you could tell us more about your relationship, interactions, and work with the Pointe-au-Chien Indian Tribe.
Who would like to go first?
Sure, I can go first. So I'm relatively new to working with this particular group. I was actually introduced to them by Dr. Cheruiyot just late spring when we were working on a proposal together. And so it's been really rewarding to be able to go out there post Ida and help with their recovery efforts. I've gone out like 2 weekends and started to meet the community members that way. And so I have sort of the more limited experience working with them, but expect to be working with them quite a bit in the future, not only on Hurricane Ida recovery, but also some projects that we have related to coastal restoration. We're hoping to engage them in those efforts.
I've worked with the tribe since 2018 as a community partner for my plants and human affairs class. So we've worked with the tribe on different projects in the botanical documentation. We've worked on their community garden in Montague. And this semester, we were planning on building a community garden for the tribe near the community center, because the one in Montague is quite a drive away and not accessible to members of the tribe who live in the bayou. But of course, then we've shifted that to working with the tribe to clean and to try and just figure out what we can do, collecting supplies and bringing it to them for the post-Ida recovery.
Hi, so I'm Laura Kelley, and I started working with the tribe in January of 2005 and worked with them on their historic research for their federal recognition petition. And as most of you know, August 29th, 2005, Katrina happened, and then Rita happened a few weeks later. And one of the results of those storms was Tulane implementing the policy that service learning would be a requirement in order to graduate. So with that, I immediately created courses that use Pointe-au-Chien as a community partner. And so we've been doing that ever since then, and different projects each year. So it's been very rewarding. It's been different, and it's exciting to be here. And I think it's exciting because this panel is comprised of 3 different people from 3 very different backgrounds, illustrating that there's not a department or a profession at Tulane that really couldn't be valuable and set up a relationship with the tribe, that there's something to offer, that you don't have to just be an environmental or historian, but we can find ways to make it all work. So thank you everybody for being here.
as a follow-up to what you just said, Laura, I think it'll be useful to share some of the historical and cultural context of the Pointe-au-Chien Indian Tribe to help us understand the realities that they're currently facing, and also explain to us how language matters and how we refer to the tribe itself.
Yeah, thank you. So historically, culturally, the members of this tribe are primarily Chitimacha, and the Chitimacha historically kind of ranged from the Mississippi River throughout the Atchafalaya Basin over to kind of Vermilion Bay and then up towards Point Coupee. So sort of a very broad swath of Louisiana, present day Louisiana, kind of west of the Mississippi River. Their members were situated in different Chitimacha communities, many of them up by Point Coupee, and around Louisiana Purchase time, around 1803, they began to migrate down the bayou, in large part to escape plantation economy. We have a lot of Americans coming in and a lot of white people coming in, and there was pressures and other things. But I think it's important to recognize that they're moving within their territory. So they're moving within traditional Chitimacha land, and also that even during this time, it was typical for the Chitimacha, while having settled villages, to go down to the seashore to fish, different hunting, different other areas. So they're moving around the Atchafalaya Basin and the Terrebonne Basin frequently, and obviously that's their knowledge of the land and the water. So they're kind of transferring it from there just further down. Where they are situated now, which is on Bayou Pointe-au-Chien, and hence the name Pointe-au-Chien Indian Tribe, for their very specific community tribe, was isolated. And so they sort of had their control of how they interacted throughout the 19th century and into the 20th century with, the market economy and other things. But it gave them the freedom to conduct their life as they saw fit, which involved hunting, fishing, shrimping, crabbing, growing crops, having cattle, and the rest of it. And all that was great until oil and gas was discovered in the 20th century. And oil and gas is part of the reason why we have a disaster today, because they began to cut the channels every which way. And then they were cutting channels into the marsh, into the ground, just for property lines, and all kinds of things that we now know allow for saltwater intrusion to come in. And then when we decided to straitjacket the Mississippi River after the 1927 floods, that natural abundance of soil and other nutrients that came down the Atchafalaya no longer was replenishing the land. So the land is both sinking and saltwater intrusion. And so they're a community that's they're kind of on that forefront of what it means for coastal erosion and climate change. And that land used to be, as I'm sure many of you know, that kind of barrier, helps slow down the hurricanes for us living in New Orleans. And so as that disappears, we're affected here in other communities. So it's not just the tribe. So there's the decision and the choice by them to stay in place, resilience, not to move away. And I think, how do we confront and deal with these questions, which is something that Julie is working on and Jelagat's working on, and that we have to ask ourselves. We can't, the solution can't be just move away, besides the fact that it takes away from the whole idea that this is your home and your land and your identity and your culture and your way of life and everything else. So it brings up those really big questions. And I'll just segue briefly to the idea of language. I've seen recently, because of the storm, reference to the tribe as a community, the Pointe-au-Chien community, the Pointe-au-Chien, oftentimes just as Pointe-au-Chien community. And I wanted to emphasize the importance of recognizing them as a tribe, as an independent entity, and as part of the First Nations, the people of this land, the first peoples of this land. We have a Tulane community and we have this community, we have other communities. In some ways it makes it very generic, which does them a disservice. So the idea of always, referring to them as a tribe is important. And I think it's important for all for all Indigenous communities. So that would be kind of like the short and sweet on protocol with regards to that.
And I'm really glad you brought that up because, again, someone who's really new to working with the tribe, I didn't realize that. So I tended to use the word community because I was afraid I would use something offensive. And so I opted for the generic over maybe being offensive. So I appreciate that. I think that's important.
Yeah.
Thank you. Now, I'd like for you to discuss what is needed right now. What kind of support does the Pointe-au-Chien Indian Tribe need?
We need a lot of labor. We need able bodies to move debris, to move. There's a lot of trees in their properties. We need to move that so that they can start, the tribal members can start to see the path to rebuilding. There are also houses that need to be taken down. So structures, they're still standing, but they're inhabitable, so they need to be torn down. And that again moved out into the street so that they can be picked up. One thing that's happening is that there are a lot of elderly that do not have, they're unable to carry some of this heavy debris. So being there on Saturdays makes a big difference when we go out, when you can come out and help. And if you're not able to help, to be there physically, there are also, a lot of people are thinking of how to, when they can rebuild. So donations, especially, I think, not the material, but, gift cards to Home Depot or Lowe's where they can go and buy the materials that they need to rebuild. Because if they need lumber, they need nails, they need other building materials. We don't know what exactly each member needs. And so gift cards to Home Depot or Lowe's is actually what is needed now. So volunteering, if you're able to come, if you're part, Tulane, we have the Wave Sync that is put together by Center for Public Service. You can also if you drive yourself, then you don't really need to sign through Wave Sync because that is especially for people who need a ride in the bus. But if you're able to drive yourself or carpool with friends, sign up, either you can email us or also we're working with Glass Half Full and they have created a sign up sheet for this weekend and they create a sign up sheet for that weekend. The reason why we need, we need to know how many people are coming is that the tribe meets and communicates regularly and they create a list of how many houses need help, how many people will be present to get help. And therefore, then we know how many people we have so we can divide those people to the houses that need help.
Yeah, and it comes with feeding and logistics and everything else. I wanted to really emphasize the gift card. It's moved from not needing like those immediate supplies like after the storm with, from everything from baby diapers to, canned food. This they have in abundance, although N95 masks, those are needed. And that the gift cards are huge because it allows them the freedom to buy something for their specific home. And the destruction is catastrophic. It is, this was a wind event, it wasn't a water event, and it looks much more like a tornado blew through the entire community. The number of houses that are habitable, you can count on one hand with some fingers left over. And so there's a lot of physical trauma and there's a lot of emotional trauma. As Jelagat mentioned, there are a lot of elders who have lost everything. I mean, everything. And helping them with their home, you can imagine how emotionally overwhelming that is and how how much it means to see groups of volunteers come down and tell them, we've got this, sit over here, we can take care of this, and help take things out of their home, try to salvage things, put it aside, and do the physical lifting, but also I think it's emotional lifting too that helps with them. And it helps too psychologically. We're 7 weeks on, and when we show up with students, they're like, wow, we haven't been forgotten. Wow, there are people who are young people who are giving up their day to come down there and to help us. And it means so much to them. And so I think it's a great experience as well for the students to have that opportunity and to work with the tribal members.
I'll add to that, just, you know, from my personal experience, one of the residents that we volunteered with was a former teacher. And so she really enjoyed, like, we were helping her pack some things up because she needs to move everything out so that they can properly sanitize and clean the house and everything. But when we took our lunch break, she really seemed to enjoy sitting around the table with us and giving the students, us young folks, advice on life. And I felt like it was clear, you know, that us being there, that she really appreciated that, and just even having kind of a somewhat normal, you know, gathering like you would. So
Thank you all. Now I want to move on to questions about how to support the tribe in ethical ways, as is in any effort to support a community that, you know, where people helping are not members of that community. There are pitfalls to avoid and protocols to be mindful of. Could you address that?
I think the thing I keep in mind is don't ever tell them they're wrong. If you disagree with how they're doing something or what they want to do, or maybe they have a different, you know, if you look at their house and you go, okay, I would prioritize this, this, and this to start the cleanup, and they want to do something different, I think it's best to just go with the flow. I think that's one way of showing support, is just letting them know, yes, we hear your voice and your concerns. And they're going through so much right now. Having someone come in and say, no, the better way to do this is not what they want or need to hear right now. That's going to be stressful. And so that's something that I kind of kept in mind while I was volunteering.
I think prepping the students, if you decide to go out with students, and I'm hoping that we can maybe continue these efforts in the spring, because unfortunately by November 13th, which is the last Saturday, and it's homecoming. So we'll see what happens with that. And then of course we have Thanksgiving and everything. But if you were to drive down there tomorrow, you would think that the storm just happened last week. And this is with 50, 100, sometimes 200 volunteers working all day. You know, if we get 2 homes done on a Saturday, that's a really good day, like for the ones in bad shape. But prepping the students to be sensitive and to listen, as Julie mentioned, but also to maybe take a moment to talk and hear what they have to say, or if somebody seems to be agitated or upset, just to keep in mind that it probably has more to do with the situation than the students themselves. But more often, I think now also, again, 7 weeks on, is people are just happy to talk and interact. And, you know, when you just want that normal life again. And so I would say that taking those few minutes and asking about them and not being shy is always going to be welcomed.
And, you know, I'll add on that often when we are supporting a community, we can get in our mind that we're there to save. We're not, you know, eliminating that saviorism that can come with volunteer is very important because you are giving your time, you're giving your resources, but also respecting that they don't have to allow you there. So when you are there, it's an honor that they're allowing us to be there at this time that they're very vulnerable, and that they don't take it for granted, but we cannot take it for granted that we are there either. So, one of the things that I noticed weeks after is that, people would say, I'm coming down. They were not asking for permission to come down and help. The homeowner may not be there. They may not be emotionally ready to work on removing this debris that day. So, understanding that we might go down there and 3 homeowners might say, no, today I don't want people to be there. I want to just have time to myself, which happened this Saturday. Is one house that was on the list. The homeowner said, hey, I'm just not up to it today. I would like to just take time off and be, stay at my home or whatever they were staying that day. So understanding that it's an honor that we're able to go there as much as the devastation is there. And you're looking through, one other thing is that if you're looking at, and not just for now, even future, is that just because you have things to give doesn't mean that you should give. An example is there were boxes of canned food that were delivered, and all those canned food, they were rusted because somebody picked up, all this, and perhaps it was a grocery store or somewhere, but things that are completely, you would not put it on your shelf. Neither of us will eat that. So think about, as you're giving, can you take that yourself? Would you take that before you serve, you give it to somebody else? But yeah, so, coordinate, understanding that we need to respect their time, we need to respect their space as well.
Thank you. I'd also like you to speak to faculty who might be considering partnering with the Pointe-au-Chien Indian Tribe for a service learning class in upcoming semesters. What advice would you give them?
I think we spend so much time here at Tulane, especially when you're creating a new course, that you would, you're thinking about all the protocol and the approval process and with CPS in your department, and you forget to ask the tribe. And the tribe has its own protocol that you need to follow, and you can't sort of show up and say, okay, I've got this plan, let's get started. And also listening to what the tribe needs. So, you don't want to kind of just say, hey, here I am, what can I do for you? They may be like, well, I don't know, what can you do for us? But in my situation is I'll have ideas year in and year out. And then I'll say, look, I'm thinking about these different projects, and they'll be like, oh, well, that's good. Or actually, we're thinking that we need something more on curriculum. And what about if the students did this and that? So it becomes a true conversation and a true collaborative effort. And that you are seeing, okay, what is needed? What can I offer? But you going with your ideas, but you're listening to them. And I would say it's incredibly rewarding, right? I've been doing it for years. Jelagat's been doing it for now going on 3 years. And the needs change over time. It's not a like, okay, I'll do this one project and this is the project I'm going to do every single year. Unless that project is rebuilding the marsh, in which case we probably can use you every single year. And please do that. But I think those are, to me, the most important thing, and that is giving yourself plenty of time to talk to the tribe about what your ideas are, asking them, listening to them, what's feasible, and the fact that your project has to be approved by the tribal council too. So for those procrastinators and people who wait to the last minute, it's not going to happen that next semester. It's going to need to happen the semester after that with time, except for the disaster relief. That showing up, other than planning with the tribe is welcomed.
right now I say, please join in and help, because we need a lot of help. In the spring, I have a class, a service learning class that I will be continuing, bringing them to continue with cleanup. So those schedules will be set, and I think we'll would like to partner and continue with the disaster recovery. But yes, it's an amazing tribe to work with. I've made so many friends there, and it's the, they become family. And, when you, even just after work days, you can sit and have these conversations and feel like you don't even want to leave. And I've taken students where, before Ida, where, we finish working and we all sit with the tribal members and we eat. And I'm having to tell students, please, let's go. Let's, time to go back, because they are, they're just embraced, and they're embracing the tribal members. It's amazing. So please come and join us.
I'll say, I think going out and volunteering right now is a great way to start to get to know the tribe if you're interested in working with them. So just to take a step back and I guess mention, I was pretty naive going into the area and I didn't know a whole lot about them, but also just in terms of, I guess, how we talk about service learning at Tulane. This is at the risk of sounding awful. When I first went in there, I went in kind of feeling like really kind of nervous. Like, am I going to be going into effectively a foreign country? Like that was kind of how I felt like, right? It's their tribe. They have their traditions and I don't know a whole lot about it. And I'm an outsider. And I think one of the things that really struck me volunteering was how much more I had in common with them than differences. And that was something that it took me going there and talking to them to fully appreciate. I mean, I knew I would find common ground, but I didn't appreciate just how much until I was there and actually interacting with them. And the first family that we helped, it turned out she had 2 kids who were very close in age to my son. And I was really excited when she reached out to me on Facebook afterwards. And so I'm hoping that, we can build that relationship just because I really enjoyed working with her and talking to her kids. And then if I'm continuing to volunteer, then I have an excuse to come see her every so often as well. So I think you don't really realize until you're there.
I wanted to jump in there. One of the things that I do with my students is kind of break down all these misconceptions and preconceptions that they have, and a lot of times they don't even know they have. And I think Julie spoke to that really well. And it happened after the very first time I taught the course, and we had 3 or 4 roundtables with tribal members, and it was the end of the semester. And one of the students, I sort of said, any more questions? And one of the students said, yes, do you use or like, condiments? And I stopped and I said, my mind was like, what did the student just say? And I'm thinking, did the student just say condoms? Like, what was going on? And the look on my face was like reflected by all the tribal members. And like, we're all like, what? And that's when the student said, well, like mustard or ketchup or mayonnaise. And I was like, okay, student did say condiments, but it was so strange. And it made me stop and say, okay, where did that come from? And then we talked about it afterwards. And I realized then that how deeply embedded in most people's minds are several things. And that is the idea of the John Wayne Western. When they think of Indians, they immediately think of teepees, buffaloes, the Southwest, everything that's been shaped by those 1950 Westerns. They have ideas that, everybody is very spiritual and in touch with the land, and all kinds of things that they sort of project onto Indigenous people, and not just Pointe-au-Chien, but sort of all. And so now what I do, thanks to that, is we spend the first class kind of breaking it down, and they realize they've got Pocahontas in their head, and they do have, teepees and buffalo and stuff. And and at least to become aware of it. And so I would say you probably, or everybody here, many of you probably have those same ones. And when you go down there, just kind of stop and do a mental check yourself and go, oh, okay, there it is. Okay, they're houses and they're on stilts. And okay, this is a shrimping crabbing community. This is not what I pictured, but I got it. And another aspect that has shaped, I would say, the psyche of this tribe is that they do not have a history of removal. So they weren't part of Andrew Jackson's Trail of Tears and the forced removal from their land. And that is different when you do deal with nations who have that in their kind of cultural and historic memory. There can be sometimes some confrontation or suspicion or with government or white people or non-Indigenous people because of those experiences. And the tribe doesn't have that. They are open and generous and caring, and they love to meet people, invite in and share over food. Probably hard thing for them this particular fall has been not being able to provide home cooked meals for all the volunteers. Like, to them, in their mind, that's just wrong. Like, people come into their land, into their tribe, and even helping them, and they can't offer the hospitality of feeding and sharing a home cooked meal. Has been something that, like, each week I'm going, it's okay, we're here to, this is time for you to step back and allow us to do the work. But it's indicative of where they are and what Jelagat was saying, that they want to spend time, share time, talk, get to know you, and develop those relationships. And at this point, because I've been working with them for so long and Jelagat's been bringing down students, it's kind of an annual, every semester, it's like, okay, what new batch of Tulane students are coming in this week, and this year. They get excited. They get excited because they get to meet, and have that connection with Tulane. So it's something to, I think, kind of just be aware of internally, but also realize that there's a lot of warmth in this community.
I will say we should assure them right now that it's important for our students to also experience Red Cross meals, because a lot of us donate to the Red Cross, but like, I know I personally had never been like the recipient of the services that they provide. And so like, just that was an interesting experience for me too, to see like, okay, so my money's going towards this kind of thing.
I actually had several of my students several weekends ago where we ate from the Red Cross coming by, and they were standing there like, we've seen this on the news, but I can't believe I'm standing here getting a meal. And I actually thought it was kind of cool to like see something that they've seen so much in the media, and now they're part of those efforts on the other side of it.
Thank you. Could you give examples of ways to help for people who may not be able to go to Pointe-au-Chien and volunteer? You mentioned gift cards. I'm going to pop in the chat box the GoFundMe campaign that the tribe is running. What other ways can people help?
I know, so my students and past students have been really active in thinking about ways beyond just a donation. Cash is always good, but if that's not possible, I have, for example, one student who's an artist, and she's created these engravings, and she's selling them each for $300, and that money is going 100% to the GoFundMe site. So that was one way. She's like, I don't have the cash, but I do have this skill, and I can do this, and I can create my art, and it can go towards that. So she started that campaign, and that set off other former students actually with what skill set do they have to be able to provide campaign. And many of them are just kind of regularly posting stuff on Instagram. So reminding people like, hey, it's still here, it's still happening, or reaching a new audience. So So I thought the art was a very creative way of something, if you have that skill, that you could think about doing.
Thank you, Laura. Where do you see medium to long-term efforts going? What will they likely look like? And how do we continue supporting the tribe once people, forget about the headline?
Julie, you want to talk about your project? I think it's kind of exciting and new.
Okay, so that's going to be the very, very long term. In the medium term, I'm hoping that Laura and Jelagat will help me in terms of communicating with the tribe for more specifics on rebuilding. I'm hoping that maybe some students have, say, participated in Habitat for Humanity and picked up some skills there that would be useful. In the longer term, the project that Jelagat and I are working on deals with coastal restoration and using recycled glass sand from glass half full to do the projects. And so at the university, we're investigating things like what grain sizes of sand are going to slow down erosion the most, which ones are going to be easiest for plants and trees to take root in. And then we have folks looking at, the coast as a whole, which is where do we need to shore things up with the sort of the least material for the most benefit. In terms of the Pointe-au-Chien tribe, we are looking at specific sites in their lands that they would like to protect. So Jelagat had identified an area near their community center that it seems like every time it rains, there's a big puddle, and the puddle gets bigger and stays around longer. And it's right up against the posts that hold the building up, right? So this is a problem. So we're thinking about, is there something we can do there? We still need to talk to the tribe about specifics, like you said. We've also talked about, Dr. Kelley mentioned saltwater inundation. So are there places where we can use the sand to, I don't know if it would be narrowing some of these waterways to prevent less salt water from coming in, helping more saltwater resistant plants take root so that the land doesn't get eroded further. And so these are the kinds of projects that we're thinking about. And so timeline wise, we're hoping to do our first project in the spring. So we're going to be talking with the elders of the tribe soon about doing that. And then if the grant makes it beyond the first year and we make it to what they call phase 2, then we'll have the resources to do bigger, larger scale projects, and hopefully we'll continue to grow from there.
And I think, with the saltwater intrusion, I think one thing that happened with the canals is not just the saltwater intrusion, but also that these canals get wider and wider. So over time, the canals are connecting and it becomes a mass of water body. So with that, you're losing land. And so we need to slow down. One, we need to block the canal so that the land is not being eroded, because two things are happening. There's land loss and there's saltwater intrusion. When you have saltwater coming in, you're losing a lot of the vegetation that are susceptible to salt water. And that is what is happening, is that a lot of plants that the tribe would use for building structures, medicinal, food, and so on, all that is disappearing. And so this is part of this project with Julie, is really to rebuild and slow down the land loss and the saltwater intrusion as well. And that's, one of the groups that's studying the plants is the plants can't, so that putting the sand, also implementing and revegetating the area. So if you have ideas on, as you said, Julie said, in the spring is when we're going to be actually doing the work physically there, is that now is how do we put sand, but how do we keep that from being washed off, because that's what's happening with what is existing at the moment.
And we have to work with the tribe members too in terms of choosing the locations. When I was down there, it was very clear that some of the canals they actually use, right, themselves. We don't want, and so from an engineering standpoint, we could come in and say, hey, this canal is one of the problem ones. This is one of the ones we want to block off. But the tribe members could come back and say, well, that one's actually really important for us and for our tribe members who fish and crab for a livelihood. So that's not an option. What's the next, best options? There's got to be this conversation about, in terms of what's best for the engineering may not be best for the tribe members. And can we find a solution that will benefit both?
Yeah, so to also add to that, I think I wanted to emphasize what I said at the beginning, and that is, I think there's every single department has something that you could offer. So if you are in, I don't know, languages, let's say, I can tell you right now that they could use help with, linguistics or French language or programs that could be set up there. If you're in education, I could think of different things. If you're in English class, whatever, I'm thinking obviously humanities that are coming to my mind. But if you're wanting to help, but you can't think of like what would be a good project to even sort of begin a conversation with the tribe, and you don't want to sort of just show up and say, hey, I'm here to help, but I don't know how, feel free to email me, Julie, Jelagat, because would love to brainstorm with you with ideas and find out what your skill set is. And so that's kind of like short and long term in terms of creating and beginning that partnership with the tribe. Obviously, building is huge. And here's my plea and my call out for anybody in the School of Architecture, or somebody in the School of Architecture, or somebody who knows somebody in the School of Architecture, because I was here before Katrina, I was here after Katrina, and I saw the way the School of Architecture kind of pivoted to say, okay, we have a city that's underwater and we've got to think about, sustainable and affordable building and best practices. And they really, they kind of changed and they created different programs and became a model. And I think this is another one of those Katrina moments. It's an Ida moment. And of course, it's somewhat ironic that Ida also made landfall on the exact same day, August 29th, but 16 years later. And I would, oh, good, there is somebody from School of Architecture. Sarah, talk to your people. And because, you know what, when you go down there, because it's a wind event, you're seeing just the guts of these houses, and some of them are all demolished. And then you've got this one just standing perfectly still and with demolition on either side. You have ones that have the back half ripped off, but not the front half. And it would be a situation of like examining, looking, being able to say, okay, so what's happening in this house that they were able to stand these catastrophic winds, but this one didn't, or this one received partial one. How can we help rebuild with people who can afford it? Right? And what kind of best materials? Because I will tell you that this could be like a lab, working with the tribe. And this would be something that would be applying for every coastal community, because what's happening here, it's going to happen in Staten Island, it's going to happen off of the Carolinas, it's going to happen elsewhere. And then think about how many people get hit with tornadoes and other things like that. So it's not just to the benefit of Pointe-au-Chien Indian Tribe, and there are other tribes that are down there. There's 4 other tribes that live in this area that would do it. But to me, this is something much broader discussion, and what an opportunity for Tulane and School of Architecture to reach out and to say, hey, let's go down there. And you look at models at architecture school, and they're often very pretty and nice and pristine and the dollhouse kind of look. And then you go down there and you're like, okay, so this is what it looks like when the giant comes along and just rips off the front and says, haha. But that's what I would say, like, okay, look at what's there, what stood, what didn't stand, what's affordable, what's realistic. Because of course, if you have all the money in the world, sure, you can rebuild whatever, wherever, however, but that's not what we're talking about. And when you're down there, you'll see the houses are, 18 feet off the ground. And I've, again, because I've been fortunate to work with the tribe since January 2005, there were a lot of houses then that were still just that typical 2-3 feet off the ground, kind of like a New Orleans house. And then Rita did a lot of damage down there. And so people built higher. And then in 2008, Gustav and Ike hit and really hurt the community. So they built higher again. And then Isaac happened in 2012. And so that some people built a little bit higher. But now they've got the steel, the concrete, they've got the height, because it was always a water event. Water wasn't what the issue was here.
Yep.
And
if anything, the building up higher and higher, it helps you with the water, but makes you more susceptible to the wind. So that's my engineer's lens, but I'm a chemical engineer, so I can't go much beyond that. That's where the architects and the civil engineers know more than I do, the structural engineers.
yeah.
So how do you do both, build for water and build for wind?
Yeah. And so that would be my call out, and something where like I have no skill set in this. I can tell you historically what they built, and I can discuss that, but not what's coming forward. Something else I wanted to add, I was talking with Jelagat a week ago, and she was mentioning wood chips. And this is kind of an immediate thing, and I'm doing another call out, and that is she has access and resource to a huge number of wood chips, and she can speak to how wood chips can be a possible use down there. What we're all lacking, or what she's lacking, tribe is lacking, is a place to store them, and like, from the company to this. And so I always believe in asking, because the answer is always no, and putting it out there. And so if there's a lot, if Tulane has land, like, across from the boot, the empty lot that's there, that's still empty. Or if you know of an empty lot somewhere that, we could just have all these wood chips go and they can be used from there. I'll let her talk about it more, but that I wanted to just kind of bring that up as another like shout out for help.
So I think the biggest, one is if you know of a company, tree cutting that we could take so that they can chop down, wood chip all the trees that have fallen there, that would help with cleaning and pulling those that debris out. And one thing that I love about wood chips is that you could use them for pest control. Of course, you can use it to rebuild the soil. But you also can use it, cover and control weeds, control pests, because the wood chips have natural phytochemicals that can deter pests from coming into your yard or your garden and so on, but also that they work for water retention. So if you need wood chips, yes, we need to get all that, we need lots for wood chips. There've been discussion on Laura, about right now they don't have the boats. People don't have the boats to carry this chunks, the wood and wood debris to the burial mound, so they can put it around, and that would help to hold the sediment in that area.
Yeah, I think, just again, thinking about kind of long term, and also as an idea that you may have access to a resource that you're not aware that could be beneficial. And so, no idea is too crazy, and it's always worth a discussion on it. And there's just so many possibilities, and those things change over time and evolve, and so just open to anything.
Thank you all. Before we open it up for questions, is there something you haven't brought up that you would want to bring up now?
I guess one of the questions I get, because we've worked, my students have worked on, and I've been working with the tribe on, is the federal recognition petition. So, and it's just kind of background information that people are curious about. So the tribe is state recognized, and they're in the process of seeking federal recognition. And it's a onerous, laborious process, and involves tens of thousands of pages of documents, and is expensive. And we're kind of in the final stages of it. And I think they have a very strong chance of getting federally recognized. But it is, well, let me stop for a second. There are 7 criteria, and you have to meet all 7 criteria. You can't meet 6.5. You can't meet 6 3/4. If you don't meet all 7, you don't get it. And that's part of the, being very deliberate with the petition, because you have to make sure that you're meeting every single section of it. And there's a historic section, a social community section, a political section, all kinds of things that you have to demonstrate to the federal government. But if you are federally recognized, then you enter into a sort of nation-to-nation relationship with the government, and it entirely changes the dynamics. And it's something that would very much benefit the tribe, benefit Louisiana, benefit the other tribes in the area, because what it would mean is that all that land that has been with channels cut from oil and gas, this would now fall into a different discussion and responsibility, in particular to the oil and gas companies, to actually really step up, to have to be able to replenish and work on that land and getting it hopefully restored to a certain degree, or however much it can be. But unlike practical aspects, we have 4 federally recognized tribes as it is in the state of Louisiana. And for example, the Tunica-Biloxi, which are up in Marksville, the Jena Band of Choctaw, which are up in the north. And whenever there's a natural disaster like Katrina or Ida, or there's a man-made disaster like the BP oil spill in 2010, the federal government goes to the federally recognized tribes and says, okay, so how can we assist? Even though those tribes are not located on the coast and were not affected by those things. And so it kind of gives you a sense of the bureaucracy involved, but how kind of crazy it is with that system, but the importance of that. And so if people are wondering, my students will say, oh, we'll be federally recognized. Do they want a casino? No, they don't want a casino. But what it means is so much more. It means having a place at that table, and that table as an equal, with the federal government, and to be able to negotiate and then protect your tribe, protect the members of your tribe, and look at the welfare of your tribe, and in a way that is different than being state recognized, or not even being recognized at all. However, having said all that, because there is great political wins with it, it is of course a colonial instituted system, right? We've got a government who says, now you have to prove to me that you're an Indian, and I'll decide whether or not you're Indian enough to do this. Putting all that aside, people do wonder about legitimacy and aspects like that. And I would say, again, that's one of those preconceptions to kind of check yourself on, and with conversations, and probably based in part by a lack of understanding of the whole process and what it means, and what's going on with it. So again, it's something that if you have questions about, and this is obviously not the place to get into deeper discussions about it, but I'm happy to sit down and talk to anybody to give a bigger, deeper background on that, because I know it is something that people wonder about, they're often confused about, and even the relationship of nation to nation, and how that works with the federal government, and how it all plays out. So I wanted to just throw that out there too.
Thank you. Just wanting to point out a couple of websites that Jelagat put in the chat. And I'll put the GoFundMe, the link to the GoFundMe campaign here also. Also want to point out the event that Ben put it in the chat earlier, where on November 1st, tribal members will be holding a conversation on surviving the storms, climate change, disaster, and indigenous resistance. So the link is there for you to sign up. And yeah, I'd like to open it up for anyone who has questions.
Hello. My name's Haley. I have kind of a question about the federal recognition thingy. So I'm a law student right now, and I was wondering if there's anything I could do to kind of work with the tribe and help them with the federal recognition aspect, like maybe in the area of like environmental law or something.
So yes, that would be like a conversation we should have further. They had begun an Aboriginal Land Claim Act back in the 1990s, which then got stayed for waiting for the federal recognition process. And to give you an idea of how long this is and how convoluted the process is, you have to first begin with a letter of intent, which they sent in 1995. Yes, stop and absorb that for a moment. 1995. The government then responded for saying you can now submit your petition in 2005, 10 years on a waiting list. So these things are, I think, meant to be long and difficult. But environmental law is a big thing. And Patty Ferguson, who's going to be speaking on October 28th to my students, we've opened that up. It's going to be the Commons 300, the DeBoll Gallery. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly. If you can, it's from 3:30 to 5. I would strongly suggest, Haley, if you can be there for that, because Patty is a member of the Pointe-au-Chien Indian Tribe, and she is also the director of the Indian Law Clinic for Arizona State University. And I think you would enjoy learning more about the process, speaking to Patty, and what you could possibly do to contribute. I know that Joel Waltzer has worked with the tribe for quite a long time, and that the environmental aspect of it is really important and critical. So I'd love to have you on board and meeting some of these people and seeing both for you to learn more, but also what you can contribute to it. So I would say everybody come to the talk next week. Patty's really engaging. It's again next Thursday, October 28th from 3:30 to 5 in Commons Room 3. And then, take it from there. But if you want, Haley, feel free to contact me off. I'm going to put my email address in there because I spell my last name with an EY, and there is a Laura Kelley on campus who spells her name LY. And so she gets emails from me. And so I want to make sure that everybody's got the correct ones. I just put it in there. It's Kelley LD, but critical that EY is in there. So does that answer your question, at least for now?
Yes, thank you so much. And I'll be sure to look into that meeting in the Commons.
Great.
Haley, I'd like to chime in too that part of the coastal restoration project involves government approval for using recycled glass sand in the environment. And so I do feel like someone with an environmental law background might have some insight there as we navigate that process. So I would, if you think that fits in your background, I'd be happy to talk to you about that particular research project as well.
Thank you so much. And can you send me your contact information in the chat too? Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Any wrapping thoughts?
I do have a question, if I could, real quick. Is there anything I was just saying that I'll be gone for a couple of weeks, and I think of the need as, obviously more immediate. And right away, I'm thinking of people to exploit and leverage, including folks I know with earth movers, or whoever can be tagged for any kind of wood chippers. But one question I also have, and maybe there's a place when I go to look at all of your resources that you have linked in the chat. Is there something we can do with assisting in looking for grant resources, or disaster management is kind of my background. So there may be something that hasn't been tapped, or maybe it's too long a question to answer in this.
No, I think you can, there's a lot of resources that they need, the tribe needs, and finding that and then sharing with the members of the tribe. And if they can use it, then yes, they will use it. So I think it's again a matter of, here's a resource, can you use this? And if they can use it, they will gladly jump in.
Yeah, I mean, you would know, Becky, better than anyone, like how much of it can be donation of building goods, like if it's with disaster. It's ground zero down there. So if you think about anything needed for rebuilding, or money that can help with rebuilding, or money that can be going towards cultural bearers, or I'm just thinking off the top of my head, that would be really welcomed. I know the LEH, sometimes they've got various grants that are out there. Helping with writing grants is also helpful, fairly helpful. So if you have that kind of skill set, sometimes this falls to Patty to do, and she's busy being, doing a lot of other things and for the tribe. So that would be good. And I think when we look at helping members and we think about cultural aspects, if there's money and funds to do that, to capture stories or to help in that respect, or those are other things that kind of come off the top of my head. And
yeah, I can start looking, even if I'm not physically able to jump until the 13th, I can at least start looking immediately. So
I would guess that they'll still be doing some debris removal even when you get back. If I look at the rate of debris removal in my neighborhood and compare like the amount of damage in my neighborhood to what I saw out there, I would be surprised if they were done with debris removal by the time you get back.
Yeah, they're not going to be done. Unfortunately, they're not going to be done. Yeah, Ben also put in here about interest in solar panels, solar generators. Absolutely. That kind of, to me, went out with the School of Architecture shout out. But that's a really good point, because there is often, or there was, I don't know if it still exists, but grant money for solar, for other things. We all experienced the 100% energy fail in Orleans Parish, and they didn't get power down there till a month after the storm. And that's, of course, if you had a home that could take power. So I think being able to have solar, if there's grants for solar, if there's grants for generators, if there's grants that can help to be independent and not tied into the grid, that would be huge. That would be another collaborative effort on cisterns, collecting rainwater, processing black and gray water waste, different things like that. What kind of new Green Deal can we put together, and resources that we can pull together to put forward, and just talk with the tribe and see with that rebuilding effort.
Other questions? We're close to our time. So unless any of you panelists have any last thoughts to share. Go ahead.
So one thing, I know we have the dates that are set to go and volunteer, but if you know a group that would like to volunteer during the week, then we can make that connection and So if let's say your friend works for a company and they would like to donate their time, but that is going to be, which a company did last week. They were able to take about 15 employees on a Monday. And so I was able to connect them with someone, and they could, they can go and work. So that it doesn't have to be confined to just Saturdays. We can also help connect during other days of the week.
Thank you.
Yeah, I wanted to just give a shout out to the screening that we're doing on November 1st. Ben put it into the chat. It is going to be a great opportunity to hear not only from Pointe-au-Chien, but also from Chief Cheryl Parfait-Dardar, and she's the chief for Grand Caillou-du-Lac, and Chief Albert Nakan, who's the chief for Ile-de-Jean-Charles. And these tribes are like, if you think of this area as sort of like as fingers, and the fingers are stretches of land and with water in between, as the bird flies, they kind of just go directly across from each other. And so Chief Cheryle's home was completely destroyed. Her family and her community, her tribe was affected by this. Chief Albert has been dealing with this for a very long time, since the island, since the 1980s to present day, has lost something like 90% of its land. And you probably heard about Ile-de-Jean-Charles a few years ago, about 5-6 years ago, when they were awarded $48 million to relocate, and they're kind of claimed to be the first climate refugees. And this is another example of the importance of being federally recognized in the negotiations. Chief Albert, through many years of hard work, got this award to move his tribe, his community. They had a plan, they had a location, they had homes, they had architects, but the federal government said, but we're not gonna, we award you the money, but we're not gonna give it to you. We're gonna give it to the state of Louisiana instead, because they'll best know how to then distribute it. It is 5 or 6 years later, and ask me where they're living and where this community has been built, because the answer is it hasn't. And it's been stymied, and the government, Louisiana government, sat on that money. So again, that importance of that relationship is there. But those Pointe-au-Chien, Ile-de-Jean-Charles, and Grand Caillou-du-Lac, you'll be able to hear from the leaders of those communities at that screening on November 1st. And then I think Ben is going to make it available on the website. So I would strongly encourage you to sign up for that and to listen to what they have to say directly. Yeah.
Thank you all. Thank you all for attending. Julie, Jelagat, and Laura, thank you for this rich conversation and for your efforts. And have a good rest of your day, everyone. The recording will be shared once the video is edited. Thank you.
Thank you very
for
much.
organizing it.